What's up guys, Lvladen here, and today I'm coming at you with a video on the 11.1 Ret Paladin changes once again. Couple days, or maybe it was like a day after I did the last reviews on the changes, Blizzard dropped a couple more, or maybe WoW had dropped a couple more that they missed in the data mining. Just to briefly go over what those changes were. Hammerfall now has a internal cooldown reduced to 0.1 seconds. Currently it's 1.5 seconds. So if you guys have ever been playing Templar and you're sitting on that 1.5 second GCD at 0% haste, then I mean, you probably never ran into this problem. But if you, like many of the Paladins out there, ran Crusade or had any minuscule amount of haste, if you did a back-to-back Final Verdict during your Shake the Heavens, especially, the Hammerfall actually has an internal cooldown. So that means that the Empyrean Hammers triggered by the Final Verdicts, if you did them back-to-back, the second Final Verdict would not drop Empyrean Hammers. This is not something that I actively really thought about too much because I always thought that, you know, maybe it would just go off a second later, but apparently it doesn't. So this is a nice little bug fix change, I guess, to Hammerfall and Empyrean Hammers. So that is nice. And then the next change is to Divine Hammer here. It's been redesigned once again, and this design actually might make it usable in PvP. We'll see how much damage it does. But basically, it's going to be a 3 holy power spender. The hammers are going to spin around you, and you're able to prolong the hammers surrounding you. So think of it, basically, this is now Remorseless Winter without the slow. Or if you play the slow talent, then it's like a 25% slow. So we'll see how much damage this does, if it's worth using. But to me, this looks like it would be a little bit better in PvP, at least in cleave fights, than it would be previously. Now, I know I talked about all the changes before, but I want to go back to talking about the Ret PvP changes here, because I actually went and I did about a day and a half of testing, not running Luminescence and not running Aura of Reckoning. And let me tell you, it was disgusting. Losing Aura of Reckoning and Luminescence, it's actually a big deal. It's a bigger deal than I thought. So the Luminescence PV talent rework, I actually don't think this is that great. This is definitely not that great. I'd rather just keep the 2%. And I mean, I know the 2% is nothing, but we have to think about it like this. Ret is a very low damage class in PvP. It used to be a high damage class, and you would get kills with pressure. Now you get kills by just hoping that you last until dampening, and one of your teammates takes them out. Hammer of Light has burst potential, but it's like pretty easy to counter right now. It's pretty easy to counter. I've kind of found myself trickling back to Herald of the Sun. And speaking of Herald of the Sun, removing Aura of Reckoning is like, it's so bad, man. I swear. Okay, so I did like 5 RBGs and a handful of battlegrounds. With Aura of Reckoning, if you're in a sustained Eye of the Storm team fight, or you're in the center node of Deepwind Gorge, or if you are just in a prolonged team fight on any of the team fight maps like Gilneas, your Crusade has near permanent uptime. And keep in mind, with that near permanent uptime, Ret will most likely still not be the top damage dealer in Battlegrounds. I mean, it can be, but if you're playing with a good DK, Affliction Lock, BM Hunter, any of the like pretty high tier specs, you're not gonna beat them. You're not gonna beat them on damage. And that's with Aura of Reckoning actually factoring into your damage. Now, removing Aura of Reckoning, it's like, I kid you not, it's like a 20% overall damage nerf. In 3s, maybe something like 15%. But you're losing out on that haste. You're losing out on like 23% haste. You're losing out on 23% damage. You're losing out on the roughly 400 to 600k crit from Crusading Strikes. You're losing out on the refreshability of your Crusade, so the duration. You're losing out on, if you're playing Herald, the Dawnlight procs of Aura of Reckoning, which, by the way, I thought it was going to be great to have Aura of Reckoning. I'm sorry, I thought the Dawnlight changes were great going into the next patch, but actually it's not really going to matter too much because we're losing the frequency of our wings. Radiant Glory does not really proc Crusade for that long, and even when it does, it's a very, very short duration. So something absolutely needs to be done about Ret's damage going into the next patch if they're removing Aura of Reckoning. Like, even if you buffed Final Verdict by like 20%, that would not compensate for the loss of Aura of Reckoning. It's that big a deal. And I was wrong. I didn't think it was going to be that big of a deal with Templar. So I did a bunch of Battleground Blitz and rated Battlegrounds as Templar, and it was pretty much just as noticeable not having Aura of Reckoning. I didn't think it was going to be as big a deal on Templar, but it turns out it was. I was seeing roughly like 15 to 20% overall lower damage than I would expect for a Battleground like an Eye of the Storm. So Blizzard really needs to be careful about removing Aura of Reckoning. Now, if their goal is to remove PvP talents that they feel are taken by 100% of players all the time, I mean, one, I would ask why. Like, some talents I understand. Shadowy Duel, that's a toxic talent. Sub-Rogue will be fine without it. But Aura of Reckoning, it's different. It's built into the way that Red Paladin deals damage. And the number one thing you need in PvP right now in order to win is damage. It's just WoW has got to that point where Zug PvE generally will win you a 3v3 game. Damage matters that much. And Aura of Reckoning contributing to such a large proportion of our Crusade uptime and our Dawnlight procs, or our sustained damage, or our ability to extend Crusade. I don't know if I just said that, I forget. It is a huge deal. So there needs to be some sort of compensation, otherwise Ret is going to absolutely tank next patch. Most of the other changes I don't think are that big of a deal. The healing changes, sure, they might suck, having to push Flash of Light instead of just rely on Pad, Seal the Crusader healing, but ultimately, it's not the end of the world. But after I reevaluated the loss of Luminescence and Aura of Reckoning, those two losses are a huge deal. I mean, Blizzard could fix this a number of different ways. They could unnerf wings. They could. I really want them to unnerf wings, but even then, I don't know if that's going to be enough. I really don't know if that's going to be enough, because we have such high wings uptime with Aura of Reckoning right now that it was basically built into our class. It's like a forum poster that I read one time about, how Hammer of Wrath went from a infrequent use to a frequent use to a now it's part of our core rotation rather than an execute. That's kind of what happened to Wings. Wings was a very powerful cooldown, and then it was kind of reduced in Dragonflight to a minute, and then it was nerfed in half, and now it's just part of our core rotation is having Wings up. And losing that is going to be a huge deal. There are a ton of PvP modifiers on Ret that makes it do less damage in PvP rather than PvE. Maybe they can start peeling back those modifiers, but we'll see. There's a number of different things that they could do. On top of that, I'm going to have a future video going over the PvP talents for Ret, because they are, at their core, they're not good, especially the new ones. Luminescence, Lightbearer, Healing Transfer, that feels so bad. That just does not make any sense. Why are we getting another passive talent that has no implication on if we're going to use it? Like, I don't even run Lightbearer every single game. In threes I do, but you don't need to do it in BGs because you're not always in team fights in BGs. Especially on node maps, you're basically a permanent base hitter. And speaking of base hitting, this talent Shining Revelation, It's a noob trap. It's a huge bait. You should never, ever, 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 ever bubble for stealth vision. You should pretty much never bubble offensively ever. There are very, 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 very niche scenarios in solo shuffle where you can bubble offensively. But even then, like in 99.9% of cases, you are saving bubble for its defensive purposes, or you're saving bubble to stop a rogue from capping on you. And whether or not you can see the rogue, it doesn't matter now. Stealth breaks after 1.5 seconds of a vanish unless they Cloak of Shadows. So this is a horrible talent that should not make it through to live because it is that bad. This will never be used. And if it's used, it's by people who don't actually know how to play the game yet. Same with Ultimate Retribution. Just remove Ultimate Retribution. Not good. Any talent, by the way, that like allows you to revive someone in PvP is kind of troll. One, because in the way that WoW PvP is designed in Arena, if you get a free revive off, that's wild. But also, that scenario is never ever happening. I'd be genuinely curious how often Ultimate Retribution has been run over the span of its existence. I don't know, guys. It's crazy. The Lawbringer removal, I'm fine with. No one plays Lawbringer. It is what it is. But we're losing two of our most frequently used talents in Luminescence and or Reckoning, and I don't know what we are going to replace them with. Syrian Glare for one of them, probably. And outside of that, I have no idea. Really no clue. But Ret needs more PvP talents. They need better PvP talents. They don't need Shining Revelation. They don't need Ultimate Retribution. I guess technically they don't need Or Reckoning if Wings is compensated. Number one thing is somehow compensate the damage loss. I'm gonna show you guys on the screen real quick. Two solo shuffle lobbies where, yes, I won them, but I was also the lowest damage by far. And you guys can pull this off in solo shuffle, being the lowest damage dealer, like if you're playing smart. But most of the time, if you're the lowest damage dealer, you are not winning games, especially as a red paladin. Yeah, I don't know. It's rough. It is really rough. All right. I hope you guys enjoyed. Stay tuned for my 11.0.7 Red Paladin PvP guide. Let me know what you think in the comments, and I will see you guys next time. Peace.